The night everything changed. Even though I'm 26 years old now, that evening when I was 12 remains crystal clear in my memory. My parents had decided to leave me in the care of my older brother, Marcus, who was 18 at the time. The prospect of having the entire house to ourselves initially thrilled me. It felt like genuine independence for the first time in my life. Marcus informed me he'd be heading out to meet some friends for several hours. He made me swear I wouldn't mention it to our parents, and naturally, I agreed. I trusted him completely, and besides, having the whole place to myself sounded amazing. He understood the consequences if our parents discovered his absence. The punishment would be severe. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Alright, let's dive back in. That weekend night started innocently enough. I settled into the den and made what turned out to be a terrible decision, watching a horror film while completely alone in the house. I'd never experienced this much solitude before, particularly after dark. But halfway through the movie, something shifted. The fear crept in gradually, not just from the film itself, but from the house's nocturnal symphony. Random floorboards creaked without explanation. Wind scraped against the windows like fingernails. The refrigerator's compressor clicked on with startling regularity. Every jarring sound from the television made me flinch, and I'd glance nervously over my shoulder toward the half-flight of stairs leading to the main floor, half expecting to see a figure standing there in the darkness. Finally, I couldn't tolerate it anymore. Why was I deliberately terrorizing myself? I switched off the television and bolted upstairs like a frightened child fleeing imaginary monsters that chase you the instant the lights go out. Once in my bedroom, I rushed through the bathroom that connected my room to my parents', brushing my teeth at record speed while trying to steady my racing heart. Afterward, I fired up my Xbox 360, hoping Call of Duty Zombies would distract me from my fear. Several hours disappeared as I focused intensely on the game. Eventually, my team was eliminated, and frustration mixed with exhaustion convinced me it was time for sleep. Then I felt it, the unmistakable vibration of the front door closing. I assumed Marcus had returned home. Lying there awake, I listened to sounds of movement from downstairs. Something felt off. Normally, Marcus would head straight upstairs to his bedroom when he got home. But these noises continued for far too long. Subtle footsteps. Indescribable thumps and thuds. My stomach began churning. That stupid horror movie had really gotten under my skin, I thought. I climbed out of bed and approached the window, expecting to see Marcus's car parked in its usual spot in the driveway. It wasn't there. Genuine panic flooded through me. At 12 years old, I didn't have a cell phone. There was no way to contact my parents or Marcus without leaving my bedroom and reaching one of the house phones, which felt absolutely impossible in that moment. I tiptoed quietly to my bedroom door, checking that it was locked. But I knew the truth. That lock could be defeated with just a fingernail from the other side. If someone wanted to enter, they could do so easily. I scanned my room desperately and decided the only hiding place was the small crawl-in closet built into the wall. I squeezed myself inside, carefully closed the door, and tried to control my breathing while listening intently. I remember vividly hoping I was just being paranoid. Maybe it really was Marcus. Perhaps he'd parked on the side of the house instead. Seconds later, I heard someone fumbling with my bedroom door, trying to get in. Then the door opened. Someone was inside my room, and I had no idea who they were or what they wanted. I remained completely motionless, listening to footsteps moving around my bedroom, feeling the floorboards creak under someone's weight, hearing objects being moved and shifted around. Every second stretched into eternity. I was terrified the closet door might open at any moment and that would be the end. I still prayed it was Marcus, but I stayed silent, barely breathing, hoping whoever it was would simply leave. At one point, I heard something being dragged across the floor, which intensified my terror. Time lost all meaning. What felt like hours was probably only minutes. Finally, the footsteps receded and moved away from my room. I remained in that closet for what seemed like forever, likely 2 hours, until I finally heard Marcus calling my name from somewhere in the house. His voice sounded urgent and angry. Moments later, he entered my room and called my name again. I emerged from the closet, and immediately he started yelling at me, demanding to know what I was doing in there and what I'd done to his room. That's when it hit me with absolute certainty. It hadn't been Marcus in the house earlier. I explained everything as quickly as possible, my hands still trembling uncontrollably. Once he understood the situation, we began searching the house together. That's when we discovered how bad things really were. Drawers had been yanked open. Several of our electronics were missing, including televisions and gaming consoles. Someone had clearly ransacked the house and stolen valuable items. Marcus immediately called the police. We waited together, still on edge, checking doors and windows. The officers arrived, took our report, documented everything missing, and asked numerous questions. They assured us they'd investigate and advised us to wait for our parents. Around 4 in the morning, our parents arrived home. My father's reaction was immediate and violent. He went straight for Marcus and struck him hard across the face for being such a careless idiot, not just for leaving me alone, but for leaving the front door unlocked. My mother checked on me, embraced me tightly, and told me she was just grateful I was safe. From that point forward, Marcus was forced to pay monthly rent to slowly reimburse the cost of everything stolen. He was treated with extreme caution after that night. I, however, faced no punishment. I was simply traumatized by what had happened. The whole experience haunted me for years. Every time I thought about it, the fear would wash over me again. The memory of hiding in that closet, hearing someone moving around my room, uncertain whether I'd survive. It was, without question, the most terrifying experience of my life, and it has stayed with me even now. Story 2. When I was very young, not even kindergarten age yet, I lived with my grandparents. My mother and father had just separated, and my father worked in the neighboring town, so I saw him every weekend. My uncle, my father's brother, also lived with us, so I was rarely truly alone. I was always instructed never to answer the door for strangers. We lived in a small, peaceful town where everyone knew each other. We had a neighbor who visited frequently to watch hockey, wrestling, or join family barbecues. I'll call him Robert. He was friendly with both my grandfather and my uncle. He often drank beer with my uncle and helped my grandfather with yard work or truck repairs. When my grandfather returned from hunting with a moose, he and Robert would haul it into the shed together. One evening, I was briefly left home alone. My grandmother was at bingo and had called for a ride. My grandfather asked if I wanted to come along. I refused because I was watching cartoons. He reminded me not to open the door for strangers, then left. As soon as I saw the truck pull away, the house fell silent. Only a few minutes passed before someone knocked at the door. I ran up and asked loudly who it was. I heard Robert's familiar voice identifying himself. I told him my grandparents weren't home. He replied that he'd just seen my grandfather leaving. I informed him my uncle wasn't home either. He said he'd been talking to my uncle on the phone and knew he was out drinking at a friend's place. Then he asked to come in. I told him I wasn't allowed to open the door for strangers. He insisted he wasn't a stranger since he was our neighbor and someone I already knew. In my child's mind, he was right. But I didn't understand why he would visit when my grandfather and uncle weren't there. I unlocked the door and opened it. Robert towered over me. He was obviously drunk, swaying, slurring his words, squinting with one eye. He stepped inside and placed his hands on my shoulders as I backed up. I didn't feel alarmed yet because I'd seen my uncle drunk many times. I told him he could wait in the kitchen while I went back to watch TV, but he wouldn't release my shoulders. I tried to pull his hands off me, but couldn't. His voice changed, filling with anger, and he said things that frightened me deeply, though I can't remember the exact words now, only the fear they instilled in me. He dragged me into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife. He pressed the tip against my belly and asked if I wanted to be stabbed. When I began to cry, he told me to be quiet or he would cut my tongue or my throat. He dragged the dull side of the blade across my throat to demonstrate he was serious. Then I heard my grandparents' truck pulling in. Car doors closed outside. Relief flooded through me and I was about to scream for help. But Robert clamped his hand over my mouth. He turned us both toward the doorway just as my grandmother entered. Her smile vanished instantly when she saw him holding me with a knife. She screamed for my grandfather to get inside immediately. My grandfather rushed in, yelling in shock and fury, demanding to know what was happening. He took one look at Robert holding me hostage and charged forward, shouting with pure rage. Robert shoved me to the floor. My grandmother rushed over, grabbed me tightly, and shielded me from seeing what was happening while assuring me I was safe. I could still hear the struggle. Eventually, my grandfather overpowered him. When I finally looked up, my grandfather was shoving Robert out the door, yelling at him to never return, then slamming the door shut. As I grew older, I realized Robert had waited deliberately. He must have known my uncle wasn't home and that my grandmother was at bingo. He'd seen my grandfather leave. That was his moment. I was too young to understand his intentions. Years later, after my grandfather's funeral, when I was sitting with my grandmother discussing memories, I brought up that night and how heroic grandfather had been. She looked uneasy. She said it was truly a terrifying night. Then she asked if I remembered that my grandfather went out hunting that same night. I faintly remembered him leaving, even though hunting at night wasn't something he usually did, unless it involved camping. When I asked why he left, she claimed she didn't remember much. Got me thinking. They never called the police to press charges on him. And I never saw Robert again after that night. My grandfather was respected in the community. He was friends with several police officers and attended the same church as some of them. He was known to be an excellent hunter. No one would ever question if they saw a bloody tarp in the back of his truck as he drove out of town late at night. Story 3. The Friend Who Wasn't Himself. This story happened several years ago during spring break in 2020 when I was 15. I was home alone one night while my parents were out of town, just relaxing in my room when I received a call from a mutual friend from school who I'll refer to as Tyler. I didn't usually get calls from Tyler. We barely texted or kept in touch, but I answered anyway. Before I could speak, he asked what I was doing. I told him I was just at home, not up to anything. He then asked if he could drop off one of my buddies because he needed a place to stay for the night. This buddy was someone I'd known since 3rd grade, who I'll call Connor. I basically told him I didn't feel like having company over and just wanted to chill by myself. After hearing this, Tyler practically begged me to let Connor stay at my house. I could sense desperation in his voice as he pleaded with me. I was still reluctant, but then Tyler told me he'd let me use his weed pen if I let him drop off Connor. After he said that, I caved and told them they could come over. Looking back, I realized how stupid I was to let something like that persuade me, considering what happened next. But I was a foolish stoner at the time, so what can you do? Connor has always been very outgoing, almost with zero filter, and he doesn't care what others think about him. So when I heard from my brother and other friends the week prior that he'd started acting really strange in his classes, I didn't think much of it at first. I asked my brother to elaborate. He told me Connor would sometimes start laughing or clapping out of nowhere, even if the classroom was completely silent. He would sometimes say very bizarre things to people for no reason, like claiming the basketball coaches were Freemasons trying to convert him. After hearing this, I realized Connor wasn't acting normal. And it wasn't until he and Tyler arrived at my house that I understood how bad it really was. I met Tyler and Connor at my front door and greeted them like any other day. I hit Tyler's weed pen as promised and gave it back. As Tyler was about to leave, he grabbed Connor by the shoulders in a very serious manner, tears forming in his eyes, and he pleaded with him not to do that thing. Connor looked at him blankly and casually responded that he understood. I really should have asked what was going on, but for some reason I didn't. I let Connor inside as Tyler left. After I closed the front door, the first thing Connor asked me was whether all the doors in the house were locked. Red flags immediately went off in my head. I knew I had just gotten into something bad. I told him they were locked and asked why. He asked me to check, so I led him down the narrow hallway by the front door to show that the back and laundry room doors were both locked. He didn't say anything after I confirmed it. We stood in silence for several seconds. Then, out of nowhere, his hand shot up like he was raising it in class, and he put on this eerie, toothy smile that I can still see clearly in my mind. He held it for several seconds before lowering his arm without saying a word. I forced a fake chuckle to make the situation seem less weird. Then Connor asked for some water, so we went to the kitchen. As I grabbed bottles from the fridge, I noticed him lingering by the drawer containing silverware, including the knives. I watched as he slowly opened the drawer and reached for a steak knife. Without thinking, I ran over, grabbed his hand before he could take it, and slammed the drawer shut. Connor didn't react or move. He just stared at me and let out a chuckle like he was pretending it was a joke. At that moment, I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. I was frozen in fear, the kind of fear people describe in life or death situations. I had never felt like my life was in danger until that moment, and I could only focus on how I was going to get Connor out of my house. He finally broke the silence by suggesting we go to the park in the neighborhood. I agreed, acting as if nothing had happened. We walked to the laundry room leading to the driveway, and I intentionally let him exit first. I told him I needed to put shoes on, which I did. He paused and subtly looked disappointed, telling me to hurry up. I shut the door, locked it immediately, and called my brother to explain what had just happened. After finishing the call, I grabbed every knife in the kitchen and brought them upstairs to my room. Keep in mind, I was stoned at the time, so my decision-making wasn't perfect, but I knew I needed to prevent Connor from forcing his way back into the house. My brother arrived with 3 friends in less than 5 minutes. They met Connor outside. I stayed inside for a few minutes, nervous, then went out. My brother and friends were talking to Connor, who was rambling about the school's basketball coaches being in the Illuminati and claiming they would sexually assault the boys on the team to make them play better. He continued talking nonsense for several minutes. Then we decided to get him home because there was no way I was letting him stay under my roof after what had happened. One of my friends eventually took Connor home, even though he insisted he couldn't go because he believed his father was going to kill him. After all of this, I called Tyler to ask what Connor had said to him that made him act that way. Tyler explained that during the car ride, Connor had been reading a manifesto claiming he needed to kill himself or someone else to prevent his father from trying to kill him. Tyler had panicked and just wanted to get rid of Connor, which explained why he sounded so desperate to drop him off at my house earlier. After hearing this, I lost my mind and asked Tyler why he would just dump Connor at my house without warning me, though I knew part of the fault was mine for not asking sooner. Later, it was revealed that Connor had taken drugs he shouldn't have, which triggered schizophrenic episodes and caused him to hear voices. About a month later, I told my mother the story, and she was not thrilled, to put it lightly. Needless to say, I avoided something truly horrific that night by being on edge when Connor entered the house. And I still think about what could have happened if I hadn't paid attention to him in the kitchen. Story 4. The Shadow at the Window. I was 10 years old when this happened. My mother had gone grocery shopping that day and asked if I wanted to come along. I remember making a big fuss about not wanting to go. It was a warm, sunny afternoon and I just wanted to stay home and shoot hoops in the street. I told her nothing bad would happen and she would only be gone for a couple of hours. She finally gave in and let me stay. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed the old basketball from the garage and started shooting around in the street where we had a hoop set up. I shot around for a while, playing little games with myself, pretending I was down by 1 with a buzzer beater shot. I was sweating from running back and forth, and at one point I stopped to catch my breath. I bounced the ball lazily and looked around the neighborhood. That's when I looked up toward the house. At the upstairs window, someone was staring down at me. It was only a shadow behind the glass at first, like someone standing back from the sunlight. I stared for a good second or two before the shape shifted slightly, and I realized it wasn't some kind of trick from the sun. Someone was up there looking out at the street. None of my family was supposed to be home. My sister was at college. My father was at work. And my mother was across town buying groceries. I dropped the basketball without meaning to. The window was my sister's room. The blinds were half open, and the figure was right behind them. I say figure because that's all I saw, no distinguishable features. I didn't know what else to do except run inside and see who was home. I ran around the side of the house and through the backyard gate. I burst inside and slammed it shut behind me. I yelled up the stairs, asking who was home. My voice cracked when I yelled it. For a second, I didn't hear anything. Then a voice answered from upstairs. It said, "Brad, come upstairs." It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my sister, and it wasn't my father. It was deeper than any of their voices, but not deep like a grown man trying to sound scary. It sounded like someone trying to sound normal. I didn't go anywhere near the stairs. I ran straight through the house, grabbed the house phone off the kitchen counter, and sprinted back outside as fast as I could. I called my mother and told her someone was in the house. She didn't believe me at first. She told me that wasn't something to joke about and said she was almost done shopping. But I started basically crying into the phone, telling her I wasn't joking. If this story moved you, hit subscribe with notifications on. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from?